Morning. How you doing?
Good, man. It's
You look
Friday.
good. I
It's
love
Friday.
that yellow beanie.
I thought it was appropriate. It's fall. It's November.
It was cold this morning.
So I got to get the fisherman's beanie.
It was really cold this morning.
This thing has no function, by the way. Doesn't keep my ears warm. This messes my hair up, but it looks all right. So throw that on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah?
It feels the season change hit me.
I love the seasons.
Like the sun going down early. It's cooler. It feels like it's fall.
I love the seasons. One of the biggest adjustments for me moving to California was at first, because we have seasons. One of the biggest difficulties for me moving in California was the adjustment of no seasons. They're much more stark on the East Coast. When it gets cold, it gets cold. When it gets windy, it gets windy. You know, we got snow. But we have seasons here in California, and I love it.
So what you're telling me is like a low of 51 is not like cold?
No, it's really cold now. It's really, now it's cold.
Yeah.
But when I first got out here, it was not. But seasons are important.
Yeah.
Seasons mimic life.
Yeah.
There are seasons to life. And I think it's really important because it gets you out of your routine, your comfort zone. There's actually something bad about stagnation, even in temperature.
Sure.
75 and sunny every day, all year. You know, you learn to live a certain way only. You learn to adapt only to that temperature. Your mind learns only to operate in a very constant state. But that's not life, is it?
It's not a natural rhythm.
Absolutely nothing about it is natural. Seasons are natural.
I mean, you can trace this back to like the ancient traditions of like how they lived and how they taught and how they mentored and how they literally farmed, right? That's a little bit distance from how most of us live today. But I guess the question is, how do we respect like rhythms and seasons? It's one of those things, right? We're like, okay, seasons make sense. It's something we can't control. Like the seasons come and they go. And how you alluded to is like we usually run at one speed. It's like usually it's all harvest usually, or try to get harvest. How do you inject seasonality to stay healthy? It's a broad question, but go with it where you think you want to go.
I think we're meant to be highly adaptive creatures. And so when something as simple as seasons, when the temperature changes, when the weather changes, we have to adapt. We literally have to be comfortable in different temperatures. And I think what that does is it is a constant, you're just always being flexible. And since you're always being flexible and your mind's always being flexible, it translates to everything. Your heart has to be flexible. You have to learn to deal with joy and grief and sadness all at the same time sometimes, or sometimes in seasons. You can't just be used to being happy all the time. You can't just be sad all the time. Can't get used to that anyway. And so with the turning of the seasons, it's kind of like a cue to us that seasons come and seasons go. They don't last forever. It's literally a season. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
In sports particularly, right? There are clear indicators when it's in season, off season. It's built in.
Correct.
Even like, let's say education, it's like in season, school's in season and school's out. There's clear indicators. But outside of those two, when we're talking business, even like family life, relational life, business and family life, they're not so clearly marked.
No.
So like I think I could be wrong on this, but I think it's more of an intention of like, okay, we're labeling this, or we're manufacturing the indicator that this is off season.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, right? Like it's time to go. It's time to push. That's in season, if you will. It feels like that's less practiced when it's not in the context of school or sport.
Sure.
How do you deal with that?
I think it's just as simple as taking stock in the fact that while there might not be a clear indicator, you know, there is a time for everything under the sun, right? And it's like we always talk about when you're riding high, it's good to celebrate, but just be aware that that's not going to last forever. And, you know, maybe the opposite is coming somewhere around the corner, just so you're grounded enough to deal with that when it comes.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something last episode of the highway, watching the cars go by. I thought about that for a little bit and it stuck with me. And something related that came up was like there's all kinds of weather coming through us. Sometimes it's a storm. Sometimes it's blue skies and sunny. Sometimes it's a light mist. Sometimes there's wind, whatever it may be. But we're not actually the weather or the sky. I'm just letting all of it come through. Whatever like comes through. Sunny day, rainy day, snow, hail. So just another analogy kind of adjacent to what you said. It's like a practical mental tool of like, what's the weather coming through right now? Thought it was useful.
I think it's important for anyone who's watching this to understand it's all going to be okay. There's good seasons and there's tough seasons and bad seasons. There's seasons where we're learning a lot.
Yeah.
Other seasons when we're not so much. We're just taking it all in. We're just in class, kind of going through the motions. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Just let the seasons come and go and do the best you can to adjust to the circumstances, but seasons will not last forever. Winter doesn't last forever. Spring and summer, none of them last forever.
Sure.
Just learn to enjoy the seasons.
Yep. There's an analogy I wanted to toss you up with, and you know I like doing that.
Is this how we're starting?
Before we get there,
oh, we haven't even started yet.
No, this kind of like the prelude. We're talking about seasons, and I feel like we're in the realm of like emotions. So this was kind of cool. I want to get your feedback on it. I'm forgetting his name, but psychologist out of Yale. In a lot of his research, he takes the participants or lay people and says, "Hey, can you briefly as possible discern between basically two negative emotions and two positive emotions?" The first cluster is tell me the difference between anger and disappointment. And then tell me the difference between happiness and contentment. He threw out a number. I want to say 90%, maybe even higher, 95%. 95% of subjects could not find the words
differentiate
or discern with language the difference between those two. And what he's pointing at is like, we're so emotionally, I guess, I don't want to, maybe illiterate. That's kind of harsh, but maybe that's the word, that we mistake emotions with wrong labeled words and just call something anger when it's not anger.
100%.
And he says this is where we become adults without the emotional intelligence because we lack the language to discern. I thought it was a really practical and useful like baseline of like, how do I appraise myself? Do I actually know these basic emotions and how do they show up in my life? I actually had a hard time, probably failed because I did the exercise on my own. I was like, what is the actual difference? Like if I had to tell someone or teach someone what the difference is between anger and disappointment.
That's very telling because you're trained in psychology.
Yeah. And the goal was like succinctly, right? Like do it in a sentence or 4 words.
So it's so difficult. In my journey in doing a lot of therapy,
Yeah.
the conversation around emotions, what they really are, what they mean, and what they don't mean is huge. And no one ever taught me that growing up. I think as a society in general, we're doing a better job now.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe too much.
Sure.
But there is a balance. Like when you're growing up in school, when I was growing up, you know, there was no like, what are these emotions? You know, like my kids have this book and it's like each emotion is a color and it just teaches them to recognize which each emotion is. And that's it.
Yeah.
Just recognize it and not to dwell in it.
Sure.
I'm not able to succinctly articulate the difference between disappointment and anger, but they're different. I know that now.
Sure.
Probably didn't know that even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
You can be angry but not disappointed. There could be some disappointment in the anger.
Yeah.
You could be very disappointed but not angry at all.
Yeah, I feel that for sure.
And it's also important to know what they are so we're not running away from them.
Yeah.
That's where the burying things comes in.
Yeah.
And we do a really good job, if we don't understand it, to just bury it. Like, you're really angry, but I don't want to talk about it and I don't want to get into this. I'm just going to shove it deep inside. That's going to come out really bad eventually.
There's a layer to that, because I would presume at one point in this, either you're referencing yourself or just a hypothetical, either or, that was a protective mechanism at one point, probably. That helped you.
So that's another thing too. Therapists have explained to me that a lot of emotions are buried under the guise of anger, but it's actually a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Could be sadness, but it's not okay for a guy to show sadness or disappointment or hurt. It's more okay to show anger.
Yeah.
And then how do you use that to fuel getting out of it or dealing with what's going on? That's also a problem. I think on the other side is really important too. Happiness and contentment are two separate things.
Yes.
You can be content, but not happy.
Sure.
You can be really happy, but not content. You can be both. And I think it's not a matter of which one we're aiming for, although there are some that are of value to always aim for. Contentment. Contentment is basically a state of perpetual gratitude. You're just content with everything you got going on. This sweater, this car, this house, I don't need more. I'm really content, grateful for what I have. I'm living in it.
Right.
I think that leads to happiness.
Sure.
I think generally speaking, the more content we are with what we have versus what we want or need or think we want or think we need. I'm sure you can tell me more studies than I know about how contentment correlates to high levels of happiness.
Sure. I want to put a side note to that too. Contentment, and I'm anecdotally speaking here, like in this moment when we do these episodes, there's a high level of contentment for me in regards to, like, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to connect with someone. And in psychology, they call it flow state, where it's like the time disappears. You're kind of in the pocket, and you can, across different domains, right? Business, sport, relationships, even sex is flow state.
Cut. Even sex is flow state. We were talking about flow state, but on a tangent, just talking to our production guy here, like, if I can go back and do it all again, I would do something like what he's doing. My perception is that he's really happy.
Yeah.
My perception is that he's constantly creating, putting stuff out there. And I think that gives people a really high level of happiness. I didn't find that until my late 30s. I never found that at all.
Wait, so
are we completely off script? We're completely off script.
No, we're not. Just trust me.
No.
I'm the pilot. Trust me.
I love it. I want to let the viewer know we're going off script.
No, this is, everything is content, man. Especially with the nature of how we're using this stuff. Like,
keep this in the editing. I love if we are going off script. It's exciting.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the flow state and your sense of contentment doing this. And I was going to say something, but I want you to continue.
And what you were just saying too, of like, you were talking about Kobe in regards to him, like he's constantly creating in that state of creation. And I find myself when I haven't designed my days or weeks or even generally like seasons of life around creation, the mentals dip. And when I say that, flow state can be achieved, it's very personal, right? Like people can dip into flow state based on their disposition, their career, whatever. But I think there is a correlation between contentment and flow state, because that state is like, I think, one of the peak experiences for people. Can it be 24/7? Probably not. But if you design your life to have as much flow as you can, I think there is a definite advantage to your well-being.
Without a doubt.
And that goes back to creation, right? We can tie this all the way back to biblical like creation definitions, but I think it's in us to create, and finding that lane for yourself, I think, is your life's work. It's a tall order.
I agree.
But I think it's worth it.
The statement you made about doing this and having contentment resonates with me because we're not doing it for any kind of compensation, fame, glitz. I think the idea for all of this was birthed out of, we have been through so much pain, and it's really important to share that journey with anyone who could be watching, who's in a really tough place and doesn't see a way out. I don't think there's a greater thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's specifically for guys, middle-aged guys who are married, could be anyone. But I'm talking about what resonates the most with me.
Absolutely.
You know, we would sit there and have these conversations and be like, there's thousands of guys that, I mean, this is like cheat code stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
To hear that you can go through some really, really bad, tough stuff, and it's okay if you don't understand it, and you don't understand what you're feeling, and if you don't see a way out, it's totally okay.
Yeah,
but it is going to be okay.
Sure,
like 1,000,000%, it's going to be okay. That makes me happy.
Yeah,
and I'm really content doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to start you off with a quote.
Yeah.
How about that?
Let's do it.
I saw something the other day and it hit home so hard because we talk about this a lot. Everybody wants the destination. Nobody wants the journey. When people are reading self-help books by these people who are very well versed experientially, they've been through it. So they're just sharing their experience. Scrolling through social media, right? I'm even going to say about the stuff that doesn't matter. The tropical islands and the Bentleys and the Ferraris, and everybody wants the destination. Everybody aspires to the destination, completely forgetting that there was a journey. And most of those journeys are not pretty. I've yet to meet someone of all the people I respect and who mentor me, who are very wildly successful by financial and other means. Like, financial is not the only descriptor of success, excuse me. I've yet to meet anyone successful that has not had a really tough journey. And it's funny, even being mentored by these people, you still just want the destination.
Yeah.
But the journey and the path is really important. So as we're sharing that with people, I think a lot of people find that very comforting.
What is exactly that they find comforting?
That someone else has been on the path and it's been really hard and they get it.
Sure.
Someone else has been through deep hurt, pain, trauma, infidelity, drugs, addiction, multiple deaths in the family, cancer. And I don't even need to know what each one of those things feels like.
Yeah.
It all produces the same really dark pain, right? That loneliness, that despair, hopelessness. Does it matter why you feel despair or hopelessness? Does it matter if we both feel it for different reasons? Is your hopelessness worse than mine? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if people do resonate with very specific ones, awesome. But if they don't, who cares?
Yeah. the details make it feel personal.
Yeah.
But human suffering is a grab bag or a handful of experiential moments and emotions that if you boil them down,
It's the same.
it's like 5.
Yeah.
The details that makes it feel
Of
like
course.
this is unique. Yeah, and I think that's why you point towards like people or groups who have quote unquote walked through the fire, been through some stuff, and made it out the other side. Stories are cognitive theories in motion. And so when people see another man's story, whether it's mythical or literal, it cognitively reframes what's possible.
Mm.
And that alone, I think, is underrated in terms of value, because what would someone do without a story that they could look to? Be like, right now, this is shitty. But
It gets better. It will get better.
there's possibility that it can get better.
No, there's certainty that it will. It will.
Yeah. And I think that whole concept of people who have been through some stuff that you can either be directly mentored by, or you're reading a book about their life, or hearing a podcast about them, is also a reason for that same character to keep going. So the person who's either going through it or has been through it is like kind of carrying the flag of like, yeah, life contains suffering, but life is not all suffering. And I think that is what has kept me going in regards to like, yeah, there's some hard things happening. But like you and I both have young boys. Right? I have one, you have 2. What are they seeing? Even if they don't know all the details, how are they watching us live in this world as men?
I hope we're able to model exactly that sentiment.
Yeah.
Which you just said, there's a lot of hard, but it's not all hard.
Right.
And there's a lot of good. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter. You got to walk through it anyway.
Yeah.
The good and the bad and the hard and the not.
Mm-hmm. So we're on this topic. You took us here organically, which I love, but I'm going to share a few things that I think you'll find interesting, maybe even shocking. Let's see. So Richard Reeves, he wrote a book called Of Boys and Men.
Not of Mice and Men?
No.
Oh,
That's
boys.
a good read though too.
Okay, just wondering.
His whole premise, he's an advocate for men and boys, and you know he's getting some pushback on it for reasons we can talk about later. But good read. There are a couple of things I want to highlight, high level, and then I'm going to zero in on a few things. Main points: educational disadvantages for men right now. So boys are less likely to graduate from high school and attend college. This is kind of a newer trend, which creates a little bit of economic challenges for men and boys. Employment challenges. So he talks about how that things have shifted from industries and higher unemployment rates for men today. Mental health concerns. I'll come back to this one. Mental health, drug poisoning, shifting family dynamics, and policy implications. There's a lot here, but there are 2 things I want to bring up. In the United States, suicide rates for men are 4 times higher than women. Historically, the highest rates of male deaths from men 45 and under, suicide was the number 1 cause. Now, today, that has like leveled out, 45 and under. But from 18 to 30, there's been an exponential spike of suicides from men and boys with that age. So overall, from 18 to 45, suicide rates is like a serious thing and rising. Drug poisoning, almost 80% of all overdoses are men. 25 to 44 is the highest, or not the highest, the densest age group of men who are drug poisoning. And what he points out here is these are retreat drugs, mostly opioids. I mean, there's like a
Downers.
I want to check out. So between those two, there's some pretty heavy stuff there.
I'm going to gift wrap it with an equally sad statistic. But I think this encapsulates everything that you're just saying right now. I saw this on social media, and it's very poignant, but when you think about it, most men will never receive flowers except at their funeral.
Tell me more.
That's sad. I saw this kid, and he was just going up to these men, asking them if they've ever been given a flower, and every one of them said no. I'm sure other men have been given flowers. Why is this important? Because for sure, flowers are given as a sign of appreciation, admiration, and it's, traditionally, men don't like flowers, right? And so we're skirting a lot of not so fine lines anymore.
Sure.
But the simple act of giving someone flowers, I just think it's funny that men aren't generally given flowers until they die.
Yeah. Until it's over.
Until it's over. And you got a bunch of flowers now, and
I think that might be symbolic too.
I don't want to read too much into it, but sure, like someone I really appreciate, despite all the hate he gets, is Jordan Peterson. Really, a lot of the stuff that he's saying is very simple,
sure,
and respectable. And I think for a while, this idea of masculinity has been so looked down upon that when you tell a whole generation of men in multiple different ways, and I don't think Jordan B. Peterson, is it B? Jordan?
I think so.
I don't think he would advocate, because he's a big advocate for, proper masculinity.
Sure.
Fitting masculinity, honorable masculinity. That's how I interpret every single. He doesn't say, go take multiple partners. No, he says, find a woman, marry her, love the hell out of her. Like, what are we talking about here? Why are we so upset at that? Like, that's ridiculous. He says, have some children and take the utmost responsibility in raising them.
Sure.
And let them completely soften you and melt you and turn you into a loving protector. Like, what are we talking about? Sure. How are people actually angry at that? Notwithstanding, he would be a big advocate for understand what your emotions are and control them. I can't go into a massive rage and kill somebody. That's called murder. There are consequences for not controlling your emotions. Sure. So he wouldn't get rid of any of that. And so his vision of masculinity is a very balanced one. It's telling men you are important. You do have a role, but society is trying to tell them, no, you don't. Society has, for a very long time, said, don't be sad. Don't show weakness. Don't cry. Don't like, I think we've just had our definition of men wrong for a very long time.
Sure.
And I think people like him are heralding a new, like, wave of thought where it's like, a man can cry. It's okay. A man can be really sad. A man can be depressed. But a man has to control those things and look to remedy those things and provide value for his family and protection and comfort. What greater calling is there? It's not better than that of a woman. A baby can only come out of one gender. A baby can only come out of a woman. We're talking at the chromosomal level here, right?
Yeah.
I can't make a baby. So each one has such beautiful, unique, independent, invaluable value. As it relates to men, yeah, you know, it's sad because I think little boys like me and you were never necessarily told those things the right way.
Sure.
You are valued. You are loved. I mean, how many times did your father tell you that?
No, part of my work now as an adult is realizing and being okay with I'm never going to get that attaboy from him. That's what it is.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so going back to anger, disappointment. It was anger for a long time. I think
Was it though? Or was it really something else?
I would paint it much of it as anger. Now it's the disappointment.
Sure. So you showed anger. You felt
Yeah.
disappointment.
I don't even know if I showed anger. That's the tricky part.
That's
Like,
even
I felt
that's
anger, but I
even more
didn't show
dangerous.
it.
That's even more dangerous.
Yeah.
But you felt disappointment.
In that process, it felt like anger. I don't know if I had the wherewithal to even say or recognize disappointment back then.
Same.
It was like, what the fuck?
Same.
How could, like, what? And I just found other ways to express it. I didn't come out and say I'm angry at this. I just found other ways to kind of leak it out.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was like the pursuit of like the perfection in sports. I was like, if you're not going to give it to me, I'm going to make you see it. That was my way.
And that's how you defined your value.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were only as good as your accomplishment. You were only as good as your accomplishment. You know where this comes full circle? Back to our boys and girls.
Yeah.
We each have a girl.
Right. Yep.
I will always tell my boys every single day, regardless of all the other stuff that happens, regardless of the discipline and the tears and I love you.
Yeah.
You're amazing. You're doing an incredible job.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could be a better listener, but so can I.
Right.
I love you. And you're everything to me.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about Jordan Peterson earlier, and one thing that always comes up when his name's like on my radar or someone mentions him is his advocacy for men to learn how to communicate.
Yeah.
Verbally and written. He's like, if you can do that, you're the most powerful dude in the room. I was like, damn. That like always stuck with me. And he kind of fans that out to like, if you can communicate, if you can like write out your thoughts, if you can label what emotions are, then you can enter a lot of situations with an advantage.
And communication has a deep root in emotional awareness. How you communicate.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, we've talked about this a lot. I communicated very poorly for the majority of my life. Without much regard to the way I was saying things. It's not really what I was saying. My wife would say that for years.
Sure.
It's not what you said, it's how you said it. I would just roll my eyes for years. Not understanding it, just not.
Yeah.
A lot.
Tonality matters.
Tonality, I mean, all of it.
Yeah.
Facial expression, everything. Much of that is what was modeled to me. I'm not blaming anyone or pointing the finger. That's what I learned. And so understanding anything different was the first big hurdle. Changing it was the other one.
Sure. How'd you change it?
Still working on it, but a lot of pain.
Like pain drove the change, or
when you almost lose your family,
Yeah.
when your marriage is on the rocks, you look at a lot of the ways you used to say things, not what you were saying.
Yeah.
For years. That drove the realization, hey, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not doing like, and then obviously you get into the whole process of trying to figure out why, because you got to get to the root.
Sure.
You know, I'm big fan of EMDR, and it works. And once you understand why what you're doing is wrong, you can move to change it.
Yeah.
In some ways, look at the spectrum of time, you know, took me much longer to understand, way longer than to change.
Understand what?
What I was doing wrong.
Oh.
How what I was doing was not okay.
Sure.
Just conceptualizing why it wouldn't be, and how, you know, when you say this to this person, how does this person react, and how does it feel when you know, when you raise your voice and your facial expression, and what does that do to a person's security, right? Just constantly feeling unsafe.
Yeah.
And how does that relationship dynamic work? It took a lot longer to understand. The change is, I don't want to say easy. It's definitely ongoing. I think all these intangible things, you know, when you grow up 20, 30 years not thinking anything is wrong. It's really hard to change that.
So in that season when, were you completely unaware, or you're kind of aware and didn't want to address it?
I think it went from one to the other. You know, like the first one is truly, there's a lot of guys that don't know what they're doing is wrong, how they're communicating is wrong, how they're treating their spouse, their kids, not understanding the effects. And they're just doing what was modeled to them.
Sure.
It's not an excuse. It is just an explanation. I think very, very few people are fully cognizant, understand what they're doing, understand the long-term effects, and despite all that, keep doing it.
Sure.
Then there's the basket that they're trying desperately, but they're just not getting the right kind of help.
Yeah.
Therapy, medication, you know, there's some mental health issues we talked about, obviously. That's very important, super important.
Yeah.
And then the last bucket is they understand they're getting the help, they're doing the work, but the work takes time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can't do the work without the first two.
Yeah.
The resources and, you know, that come to grips like, hey, this is not right. Sure. And again, it all boils down to, I think, a very basic understanding of what emotions are.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to come back to that too, like close the loop on our distinctions. And I'm not tossing this up to expose you because I failed at it too. But what I remember from that conversation was anger is received injustice. Disappointment is unmet expectations.
I would agree with the unmet expectations part. That received injustice, because anything can make you angry. Yeah, I suppose. You know, you get cut off in traffic.
Right.
That's an injustice. You know what? I'm about to give the next example. Before I do, you're actually absolutely 100% right. You're right.
And then happiness versus contentment.
I mean, I'm arguing with a psychologist. Like, what do I think I'm even saying? Yes, you're
in training.
No,
in
look,
training.
Look, you're right. The next example I was going to say, which was, this was a game changer for me. The disrespect I felt when I had to repeat myself to my kids made me angry. But what if I could see it as, it's not disrespect? One very real option was, what if they just didn't hear you? That's not disrespect. That's lack of comprehension.
Sure.
at its most base form, they totally missed each other.
Mm-hmm. No, you're widening the aperture now.
That doesn't make you angry at all.
Right. Right.
What if they felt disrespected? What if he had an opinion about putting his socks on at that moment?
Yeah.
Is that more important than my need to feel respected? No, absolutely not. Yeah. And so it is about rewiring that received injustice.
Sure.
To not. Most things, another famous quote I've heard very eloquently on social media, never attribute to malice what's easily attributable to incompetence. Get much less angry at a mistake or a miscommunication rather than a malicious intent to hurt your feelings.
Well, it's a lot easier and more convenient to react out of anger than to be wise about a situation. And to be wise, for most people, maybe not all, maybe there's some people just born saints.
Those do exist.
Yeah. You have to, I think this might be controversial, but I think it's wise.
Ooh, do it. Say it.
I think the one of the tallest orders and most important orders for a man or boys and men today is to get smart.
What's controversial about that?
Because the stats tell us they aren't.
I see. Okay. I see what you're saying.
I'm saying that across the board, right? Get wise with your physical body. Learn how to take care of that. Get wise with communication. Learn how to write. Learn how to talk. Get wise with your sexuality. Like, you have to get competent in the major aspects of life. Finances. You have to learn these things.
I don't want to go too off tangent, but I think two of the things that need to be in schools immediately is entry level emotional intelligence and finance.
Yep.
Like, we need to start teaching kids from first and second grade. Here's what $1 is. Here's what it can buy you. Here's what it can do in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years if you put it here, here, and here. Really simple stuff. Here's what anger is. Here's what disappointment is. Here's what sadness is. All this stuff is okay. How that stuff is not taught in schools, how the mental health crisis that we're currently dealing with as a global community has not taught our ways to do things.
Yeah, I was thinking about archetypes and how we're talking about, stories and mentors and models for men and boys. I'm a fan of Eastern philosophy, so in that is our samurais. They weren't perfect by any means, but if you look into the life of a samurai, I think there's some value for potentially some men. So they're obviously trained killers. They had to be like physical specimens in regards to like fighting, training, learning how to use weapons, all that stuff. But what most people miss is that samurais of that time and that cultural context were also the artists. They were the poets. They were the musicians. They were the calligraphers. And so that was like really fascinating for me to see like a group of people or men who embodied both like the savage and the saint.
Both extremes.
In one body.
Sure. I agree with that a lot because men have always been poets, as of women and artists. But just historically, this shouldn't offend anyone.
Sure.
The fighters and the warriors, all of World War I and World War II, those frontline soldiers were all men.
Sure.
They were not. Women died, yes. Women were in the military, I think, in various capacities. But frontline infantry for thousands of years has all been men. So when you bring the two together, it's kind of cool, kind of special, very unique. It shows that, like, that's the Jordan Peterson definition, I think.
Right.
Like, the best of every world. fully in control of all of their faculties, creative and destructive. Yeah.
And that takes more effort, right, to develop those faculties, or in psychosynthesis they call it subpersonalities, which might be something we can talk about. But we contain multitudes. That famous quote, right, from, I think is, who was that? Oh, do you know who that quote was from? I'm blanking. Emerson, Thoreau, one of those guys. He says we contain multitudes, meaning if I need to be a dad right now, but I'm trying to be a CEO, it's a mismatch. You're not familiar with your subpersonalities. So you probably have 3 or 5. Once you get to middle age, you have, maybe the partner, wife, or I'm sorry, husband role, maybe a dad.
You're hitting really deep on the therapy stuff now.
So there's subpersonalities that you need to know.
One of my biggest issues was when it was time to be dad, I was CEO.
Yeah.
That was a huge problem for me.
Sure.
When it was time to be husband, I was in CEO mode.
Sure. Yeah. So if you want to talk about that, were you aware of your other personalities, or you just like, I'm just this?
It's a fine line, because we don't want to get into like split personalities and that type of stuff.
Sure.
But it's normal to have multiple modes.
Yeah.
The way I learned it is like mode, right? There's a daddy mode. Yep. There's a husband mode. There's work mode.
Yep.
Right. And they bleed into each other more often than we know.
Sure.
You spend 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day being a CEO. Really tough to turn that off.
Sure.
I think I'm getting better, at being able to make an immediate pivot.
Sure.
But even that takes a lot of work. And so you need to recognize what those modes are.
Yeah.
So you could deploy the appropriate one.
Right.
There may be times when CEO mode is appropriate in daddy mode.
Yeah.
There's probably more times than it's not.
Sure.
They don't want a CEO.
Yeah.
Right. They just want daddy.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what when I bring up a samurai, obviously people listening, or even us, we're not samurais. That's like historical reference. But what stands out to me is that getting to know those parts of you, those modes or those subpersonalities really well, and cultivating them. Because when you are in CEO mode, or when you're in athlete mode, when you're in dad mode, like, you want to do those well. And that, you got to cultivate those modes. What you brought up really eloquently was like the timing of those. And so I think when you zoom out, it's like, I don't think men are just one gear. I think you can be multiple. I think you can have multiple gears. But getting stuck in one and trying to apply that to every area, I think can cause problems.
Sure.
And so subpersonality work, or modal work, I think is very, like, there's a high utility in that. It's like, let's sit down and say, okay, what is your life? What are the modes, or what are the different personalities that happen in a week?
And people would be surprised what they would write down.
Right. And how familiar are you with those? Because sometimes if you're not familiar with a tool, can't use it.
Can't use it. Or you
do you
can
use
use it incorrectly.
Sure. So yeah, that my reference to samurai is that in regards to men and boys is like, you can have the poet side, you can have the romantic side, you can have the go mode, the athlete, the CEO. Like, all of those are possible. You just got to get to know them and cultivate them. And the timing is important.
Timing is very important.
Yeah. Speaking of samurai wandered in search of wisdom that seemed to elude him, no matter how mighty his sword. One day he encountered a humble Zen monk meditating in a peaceful stream, the embodiment of serenity. Driven by curiosity and believing that the monk could provide the answers he sought, the samurai approached the monk and demanded, "Teach me about heaven and hell." The monk opened his eyes slowly and watched the imposing figure of the samurai with a calm gaze. Then, in a voice devoid of fear, the monk responded, "Why should I teach someone like you? You're nothing but a coward. Your presence is polluting this sacred space." The samurai was enraged by the monk's words, unsheathed his sword, ready to strike down the insolent man before him. But just before he raised his blade, the monk spoke again, softly and with compassion. This is hell. Something within the samurai's heart shifted as he lowered his sword in realization and shame. The monk continued, and now this is heaven. Samurai bowed deeply, understanding at last the depths of wisdom that lay beyond violence and anger.
That battle's going on in every one of us every day. Jesus himself said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. I mean, there's only 2 or 3 reasons why he could have said that. I don't have anything scholarly in front of me because I'm not up to interpreting stuff the way I want to. I'd rather, read what people significantly smarter than me have.
Sure.
But the potential is within you.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe he literally meant the kingdom of God is in everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally in everybody. Are you engaging it? Are you seeking it? Or not?
I think a lot of us outsource it.
Outsourcing?
Yeah.
Say more.
I get the sense that there's this I need a guru, I need a priest, I need a pastor, I need even a therapist. And all of those things, all of those people, very valuable. But at the end of the day, you have to take this journey yourself. They can point you the way, they can provide support. At the end of the day, man, you have to take this journey on your own.
Sure.
And you have to realize that the kingdom of heaven is within you. It can't be a scholarly overlay. It can't be a therapeutic theory that remains up here. You have to actually experience that.
It's something you have to seek and want and grow and find.
Yeah. And I think that's the top contour of mainstream inner development is maybe the medical model is influenced this, but I'm gonna go and get enlightened. I'm gonna go and get
self-help.
Yeah.
And
there's so much value there.
Someone else has the answer.
Right. But you got what you need.
Which is what we said earlier.
Yeah.
Everyone wants the destination.
Yeah.
No one wants the journey.
Right.
But it's there. Yes, different perspectives and explanations are just going to help.
Yeah.
It's, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Sometimes not so much, but meaning it's all inside.
Yeah.
You have the capability.